Okay, so now we are at the present day. We've talked about probably the last 2 to 300 years of the history of microbiology and how things really kind of fell into place and how things came about. So, what happens nowadays? Well, our biggest concern in the world of microbiology is antibiotic resistance. So we just talked about penicillin, the very first antibiotic. We know there's probably hundreds of different antibiotics nowadays. And what's starting to happen is because bacteria grow and adapt so quickly, they are now becoming antibiotic resistant. So after about 100 years of having this miraculous medicine that can kill bacteria so effectively, we now have bacteria that is unaffected. Okay, MRSA being one of the most dangerous. Just bacteria that no matter what antibiotic we try, it just does not work. They are resistant and they can't be killed by it. So now we have a lot more research into other possible treatments and cures besides antibiotics. So obviously the development of new, different antibiotics, as well as other things like looking back at sulfa drugs, looking back at some of the other treatments that were, being kind of researched in the 20s and 30s before antibiotics, really became a big thing. As well as all kinds of, we can genetically manipulate the bacteria's DNA. We do all kinds of wild and crazy things nowadays. Viruses have really kind of become more on the forefront now because viruses, I'm sure you all know this, that antibiotics are totally useless against viruses. They just do not work. They don't do anything to viruses. So the key thing with viral diseases is trying to develop vaccines that will help our own bodies be able to fight them off and destroy them. One thing that I did forget to mention with Dr. Jenner and smallpox is that no one on Earth gets smallpox anymore. Smallpox was the first disease completely eradicated from the planet. And that was because of vaccines. So now we don't even use the smallpox vaccine anymore because smallpox is completely gone from the planet, except that the United States government still has smallpox in little vials, and that is kept, locked away at the CDC in Atlanta. And the Russian government has smallpox locked away in their own facility. So every so often, the two countries send delegates to get together and they say, all right, you destroy yours and we'll destroy ours. They're like, no, 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 you show us that yours is destroyed first and then we'll destroy ours. And they never come to an agreement. They're just like, nope, forget it. We'll just keep ours locked up and you keep yours locked up. And hopefully it stays locked up, right? Because the last thing we want is any, bad guys to get a hold of that smallpox and release it, because now nobody has any immunity to it because it's gone. Our bodies don't see it anymore because it's been completely eradicated. But that's what vaccines allow us to do. And we are extremely close to doing the same thing with polio. Right now, polio is only known to exist in parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan. I guess maybe going on a year ago now, it was declared that Africa is polio free because of a lot of the work done with World Health Organization, the Bill Gates Foundation. They put a lot of money into getting polio vaccines out into the world, into other developing nations that don't have the money for the vaccines. And, it's estimated that perhaps in the next 10 to 20 years, polio will also not exist anymore. No one will get polio anymore because of the vaccine. Lots of things, like I said, being done with DNA and genetic research, the development of viruses that can kill bacteria, viruses that can kill fungus, all kinds of stuff is being done right now. And unfortunately, we don't get to really talk a lot about this topic because it's not the focus of our course, but really interesting stuff going on. And then, like I said, with smallpox falling into the hands of, bad guys, that is also a worry, is biological warfare and bioterrorism. So, things like smallpox, which hopefully will stay locked up and secure, but then there's other things that are much easier to get, like anthrax, for example. That's one of the biggest worries when it comes to bioterrorism. So dealing with those types of things, developing vaccines, developing more effective treatments for, soldiers, military, that kind of stuff. All right, so some vocabulary words here for you. Most of these are pretty easy, but make sure you know these for the test, okay? So bacteriology is the study of bacteria. Mycology is the study of fungus. Parasitology is the study of protozoa and parasitic worms. Remember that parasitic worms technically are not microorganisms, they are animals, but they're still parasites, and we still talk about them in microbiology because they are, infectious. Immunology is the study of immunity, and Dr. Jenner is considered to be the father of immunology, and when I say in the Western world, we already talked about that in the previous video. Virology is the study of viruses. And then recombinant DNA technology is the process in which you inject genes into a bacteria in order to produce something that you need. One of the best examples is insulin for people that have diabetes. So insulin is actually produced now by using E. coli bacteria. So we're actually able to take E. coli, we take the gene for human insulin, we plug that gene into the E. coli, and then the E. coli will actually synthesize insulin. And then that insulin, that hormone is, it's collected, it's purified, and that's what we use now for people that have diabetes. It's actually insulin that was developed through this recombinant DNA technology. All right, so some, a lot of the good stuff that bacteria does, we're not going to really talk about in our class, unfortunately, because our focus is really on the bad guys, okay? So how are microorganisms and humans, how can they be a good relationship, a positive relationship? Well, bacteria are very important to maintaining the environment, maintaining ecological balance, breaking down dead, decaying matter, cycling things like nitrogen and phosphorus, all that kind of stuff. Water treatment and sewage treatment. So we actually use bacteria in the water treatment process, which is very important for us to get clean, healthy water to drink. Bioremediation is using bacteria to clean up pollution and toxic waste. There's actually types of bacteria that will feed off of petroleum products, so we can use them for oil spills and that kind of thing. Controlling insects, so using bacteria to actually kill harmful insects that destroy crops and food and all that kind of stuff. Using microorganisms for the development of products. Food, beverages, medicines, chemicals, agricultural applications, all kinds of cool, awesome stuff that bacteria do for us. Bacteria and yeast, alcohol production, bread, yogurt, pickles, sauerkraut, anything that's like preserved like that, all kinds of stuff. And then we will talk about this, the intestinal flora, which is the population of bacteria inside of our large intestine, that actually some of those bacteria can produce vitamins for us, like vitamin K, some of the B vitamins. So we do actually have some bacteria in us that does help us, okay? And we call that our microbiota or intestinal flora. We also have bacteria all over our skin, And one of the things that that bacteria does is it helps to keep the bad bacteria away because it's already living on our skin. So if bad bacteria tries to move in, the bacteria that's already there will kind of be like, no, no, you go away. We're already here. And again, we'll mention that more kind of throughout the semester. So again, unfortunately, our focus is on the bad stuff, the infectious diseases. One thing that's super important to understand is the difference between a disease and an infection. And one of the most common ways to describe this is you've all heard the term STD. STD stands for sexually transmitted disease. I'm sure you've all heard of that, okay? That's actually not correct. And we really need to use the term STI, sexually transmitted infection, okay? You cannot transmit a disease. You can only transmit an infection, okay? Because an infection is when your body is infected with that pathogen, with that bad guy, okay? But you may not get the disease, okay? Because your immune system can fight it off, or maybe you had a vaccine for it so you don't get symptoms of it, okay? You know, the flu is a perfect example, and of course, coronavirus is another example, okay? You could have that thing in you. You could have the flu virus. You could have the coronavirus in you, right? But it's not making you sick, all right? So you have the infection, but you don't have the disease, okay? But you don't know it because you don't have any symptoms, because maybe you're really healthy, maybe you were vaccinated, whatever, okay? Then you cough or sneeze. You can transmit that infection to another person, and then they can actually get sick, right? So they got the infection from you, but then it's up to their body whether or not they get the disease. So that's the difference, okay? It should not be STD. It should be STI. You can only transmit an infection to someone else. Whether or not they get the disease, that's up to their body, okay? So definitely you want to understand the difference between disease and infection. That's important. Some more vocabulary words. Pathology is the study of disease. Pathogenesis is the development of a disease within the body. Pathophysiology is how the disease affects the inner workings or the physiology of the body. That's where you get the term pathophysiology. All right, and that is the end of chapter 1. We have finally got through everything. Lots and lots of important stuff in chapter 1 on the exam. You definitely want to know the taxonomy stuff, the different kingdoms, and what each kingdom has in it that we're concerned about. You know, the definitions of bacteria, fungus, protozoan, virus. You definitely want to know that information. The contributions of all the different scientists and doctors. Definitely want to know that. Remember, I won't ask you any years, okay? You just need to know the person's name and what they did, you know, what their discovery was, what their contribution was. And then, like, at the end, we had a lot of vocabulary. So just know those vocabulary words. And that should do it. So that's it for chapter 1. And as always, if you have any questions after you've watched the videos, taken notes, if you have any questions or anything, you can email me, you can see me during student hours, or, of course, you can ask during class.